Bryce, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Scott.
It's great to have you on. This is an incredibly timely conversation. You knew Charlie Kirk personally. You were the chairman of one of his boards. I'm sorry,
President of one of his boards, and there's four
president.
entities. But
President.
yeah,
Sorry, president.
I got to know him in 2017. I had been following him for quite a while, so I kind of watched him as he was just a scrappy young kid, raising money at some of the Republican events and believing that he could get onto these college campuses and start to create a little bit of movement in the youth. And obviously he was very successful at that. But in the early days, I mean, it was a scrappy organization, and raising a little bit of money and just kind of a shoestring thing, and then it grew to be $100 million organization over the 12 years of its existence.
That's it. So yeah, if you're talking 2017. So you're talking like 8 years ago. And Charlie at that point was a single guy, right? He had not
Mm-hmm.
met his wife yet. It's funny because I watched an interview today that just came up in my Facebook feed where he had her on his show, and they said, "Who's more conservative, you or your wife?" And he said, "Oh, my wife definitely more so. She makes me look like a moderate," which makes me think, what policies did they disagree on, you think?
When he said that, I mean, I don't think they had very many actual like policies that they disagreed on, but I'm sort of an edgy guy, and Charlie was a little bit more edgy, especially in kind of his early years, and by that I just
But
mean a little
teetotaler,
bit more.
didn't drink, no weed, that straight edge in that regard, right?
Correct. Yeah, and he was very consistent on that. I mean, he was just a really focused guy. He was one of the hardest working guys you'd ever meet. I mean, he spent 330 days a year on the road, and especially when he was single. I mean, he was a nonstop kind of a guy, and in order to be that nonstop kind of a guy, you can't beat yourself up with booze and things like that. And of course, I mean, he that was his conviction as well, is just the way he lived. And yeah, I mean, he was super consistent. What you see is what you get. I mean, he was a guy that wasn't any different, on camera versus off. He wasn't any different in his public versus his private life. I mean, he was truly an authentic dude.
When he was so, was he a Christian the whole time you knew him? Because I knew he had a conversion experience.
Yeah,
It,
so I mean, he always identified as a Christian. Grew up in a Christian home, like many of us Americans do. But there's a very big difference between, yeah, I'm Christian, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus Christ, to really owning your faith and really learning about it and focusing. And I had been one of Charlie's kind of drivers early on, security and spending time getting him to events when he was in California and some other places. I traveled with him, and we did some border travel together. There was things that I got to participate in and watch his transformation from maybe a cultural Christian, hey, I grew up in a Christian household, to really owning his faith deeply. And so we had conversations about things like that all the time. Hey, what do you think, Bryce, about this? I was a preacher's kid, right? So we would have conversations about some of the debates that Christians have, what we call those in-house debates, right? What do the end times look like? What's your thoughts on this? So we'd have those conversations, and Charlie was truly one of the smartest guys I've ever been around. And he was an autodidact. He would consume books. That's why, I mean, when you watch him on these college campuses and he's talking about, Marxism or things like that, I mean, he knows the materials. He's read them all. And these philosophy majors would come up and be like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You dropped out of school." And he'd say, "Well, have you read this? Have you read this? Have you read that?" And he'd challenge them on the specifics of those works. And no one could really hang with him.
That's interesting because autodidactics fascinate me because sometimes I think T.S. Eliot once said that the mark of education is education is very different than intelligence, right? He said the mark of an educated person is that you figure out, you know what you don't know. First of all, he said that's part of education. You get a sense of what you don't know, and then once you assimilate something new, you have some general sense of where it fits with the rest of the stuff, and that's why he says something like, that's why D.S. Lawrence is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met, but exhibits no marks of education. But you can do that non-formally, right? It sounds like what you're saying is Charlie was able to get that sort of marks of education informally, right? Able to sort of do that without sitting in a traditional classroom.
Well, I think, especially in today's day and age, there's nothing that is not available to us, right? I mean, you can learn virtually anything and everything by accessing the books, the same books that the college professors are coming off of, the same, materials. I mean, anything you want to learn about, you can read the source materials. I mean, and I watched Charlie do that with her pursuit of politics and the understanding of our beautiful republic, to reading all the founding fathers and what they wrote and the letters back and forth and everything. I saw him do that and then transition to doing that with early church fathers. And I mean, he was so curious a mind. One of the most recent, right before he died, I listened to him have a Eastern Orthodox priest essentially on, and talking to him about Eastern Orthodoxy, because there's this explosion here in the United States of people who are going to a more serious religion. So you're seeing Christians flock, especially young men, go towards like Latin masses and Eastern Orthodoxy, or like Reformed churches that have a little bit more hardcore orthodoxy, have a little bit more seriousness with the religion, less flashing lights and smoke and feminine music. And you're seeing well, I mean, I say that kind of as a joke, but also an insult to a lot of modern day worship music. Switch out Jesus and put the name of a girl or a boyfriend in there,
right?
And it's basically the same thing.
And that's the opposite of the South Park joke, right? Where he says,
"Yeah,
you figure out you can just switch out the girl and put in Jesus, and you can write Christian music."
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they didn't come up with that in a vacuum. I mean, it's true. It's one of those things that things have gotten so soft within Christianity. The expectations have been, so minor, there's been no reverence, right? So my point is that I witnessed in real time Charlie get super serious in his faith. And Erica Kirk was that kind of a person too, and she's an absolute powerhouse and a really just truly beautiful lady, in all the ways. I mean, she's brilliant herself, and it's no secret why they were the couple that they were. And she runs a massive national Bible study that hundreds of thousands of people, her Bible 365 people, participate in. And she's and so I think when Charlie was saying, "Oh yeah, she's more conservative than I am," Charlie was was an edgy guy in terms of even some of the things that he was willing to say that were provocative. There's all kinds of clips running around on the internet right now where people are going, "Oh yeah, Charlie Kirk was a racist," and of course they're knowingly cutting clips short. They're knowingly manipulating and mischaracterizing things, so that the people who don't know, see those things and are like, "Yeah, well, that's right." And now the challenge, and I love this, is that so much of his words are now getting out there. So many people are aware of Charlie in a time that I mean, it's like he's become one of the most well-known people on the planet because of this. That so much of his material's out there. It's getting harder and harder for them to take those things out of context and fool people. Before, the people who knew Charlie just thought he was they took at face value whatever people were saying.
Oh, okay. You paused on me for a minute there. Are you still there? Oh yeah, you paused on me for a minute
Oh
there. Sorry.
yeah, I
Yes.
was still recording on my side. Well, so
Okay. Yeah. I still got. Yeah. It's interesting because I think I'm sensitive to that criticism, right? Of the quotes out of context. I remember in the 2012 campaign, there was an ad that Barack Obama they ran that said Barack Obama said, "Look at that bridge," or he said basically they ran the clip saying, "Business owner, you didn't build that." Like he was saying, you didn't build your business, but he was pointing to a bridge, saying that this is what taxes do, right? The business owner drives the truck over the
right.
bridge, right? So, I mean, they kind of do this all the time.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I
it,
do,
it certainly happens on both sides, and I'm not in
yeah,
favor
well,
of
of
it when
course, of
anybody
course.
does it. I mean, let's attack the policies. And Barack Obama, by the way, had many of those policies that were that what they were trying to do was characterize him in a way, and they were characterizing kind of who he was, maybe true, but they were manipulating the words to get there, and I don't like that at all. I think that that's wrong. I mean, Barack Obama had things that I deeply, deeply disagreed with along those lines, but we can just hit him with the truth of his positions. I mean, Barack Obama, and by the way, almost everybody on the left and the right, I mean, you can just go look at what they've written. I mean, people write about what their stances are, then they'll run for political office, and everybody doesn't pay attention to what they actually said. They'll just listen to what they're saying on a campaign trail and forget about the book that they wrote that laid out their political philosophy.
Now, wait, okay, so Charlie Kirk, as you're getting this, by the way, I'm really sorry for your loss. By the way,
Yeah, thank
I
you
was
for
about to
that.
say in the
it's
beginning because
it's been rough.
I can't imagine what that's like to lose someone. By the way, what was it? I don't want to get too personal, and if this is too hard to talk about, let me know. But how did you get the news, and how did it feel? I mean, what can
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember
So
what that was like, right?
yeah, no, I mean, it's like one of those things, everybody remembers, where they were when 9/11 happened or whatever, right? It's kind of one of those things. So it's pretty seared into my mind. I was sipping coffee in my living room, and I receive a text. I was just doing a little bit of work on my emails and iPads, and I'm on a text thread that includes Charlie's chief of staff, his pastor, his producer, fellow board members, a couple of congressmen that are in our kind of inner circle, just I mean like a real small group of people who are close to Charlie. And I received from his pastor, Rob McCoy, who was my pastor as well. Everybody pray. Charlie was just shot in the neck on a tour stop in Utah. And from that point, everybody just kind of replied, "We're praying, we're praying, we're praying." And then when everything went silent, combined with I saw, because I immediately went on Twitter, and Twitter was just breaking it, right? Kind of within maybe a couple of minutes of me seeing that, people started tweeting it out and saying that, yeah, Charlie was just shot. And once I saw the video, that initial video that was the distance video, I knew it looked really, really bad and looked dire. When everybody on the thread went silent, I knew it was really bad news.
I as someone who's been who was close to Kirk, not just personally, but knew sort of the context of his thinking. I appreciate what you're saying about the contextualization of these quotes, but I do want to ask you about something. When he says things like, this is one that it was from Jubilee's internet show. I'm sure that you've read this one that they're throwing out,
Sure.
right? Where he says that blacks had it better under Jim Crow, right? He says they were actually better in the 1940s. It was bad, it was evil, but what happened? Something changed. They committed less crime. And the person he was debating reported that 4,000 black men, women, and children were killed in violent lynch mobs. Racial terror permeated American culture for hundreds of years. You don't think that affected the generational psyche of entire group of people. And his response is, Black America has it worse than it has been. Black America is worse than it's been in the last 80 years, he interrupts. I mean, do you see how if someone is Black, they could say, hey, this is a little insensitive. This doesn't get the full measure of how messy the American racial legacy has been. I mean, is there some point to the fact that man, for 100 years, a group of people have had it pretty rough, and there might be some consequences to that in the present? Or I mean, is that fair to? Is that a fair point to make?
Yeah. Well, let's go deep on this one, because I find this one really interesting. Okay, so first, I mean, Charlie Kirk was not racist at all, and I'll say it in these ways. Now, for you to say something that, okay, maybe it was insensitive or something like that. Okay, we kind of need to say some insensitive things. We have really stopped that healthy back and forth. Even the offensive talk that needs to like shake things loose. We have. Because of the cancel culture movement of years ago, politically correct, movement of even years before that, we stopped having real deep, meaningful dialogue. And sometimes it's messy, right? Conflict is a little messy. And then you come out the end understanding each other. What Charlie said was not wrong, but let me elaborate on what he's saying. Okay. And I had this fascinating conversation one time with a former, scholarship basketball player out of college that was sitting at the bar next to me in Northern California. I was there on business, sat down, had a meal, had a drink, started chit-chatting with him, and then we got into like this fascinating, deep, kind of contentious talk on race. And I don't remember how it ended up getting there. But I blew his mind because, we started like just really authentically talking. We came away as friends, and that's what we should be doing. But on this topic, what's happened is there are racists in our country, but we were largely I would say before Barack Obama, because I think he divided us further on this particular issue, and I think it was intentional, but we were a post-racist society in most places in the country. I grew up in Southern California, right? We didn't think about race, right? And we had, a school that, kind of had forced busing, from downtown to integrate, more Black kids into our school, and all that program. I don't think that program was particularly helpful, but we had, plenty of, friends that were, of all colors that we, played sports with and everything. And we just didn't think in those terms. Okay. Especially in California. Now there's other parts of the country that was still more of an issue, but racism was dying a death. True racists were kind of dying out. And you saw that because Black culture dominates certain things. I mean, from sports heroes to music to all kinds of things. I mean, white kids were walking around dressing like, Black dudes, right? And they're Black heroes and worshiping, Michael Jordan and all these sort of things. And then things got really effed up again. And again, I think it was Barack Obama and others that really wanted to keep us divided. But what Charlie is saying there is you
think when you say that, you think he got up in the morning and said, man, I want to divide some freaking Americans today. What can we do to pit this group of people versus that group? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I can tell you why I believe that.
I think it's one thing to say, hey, some of his policies, some of his approaches to entitlements or to taxation were polarizing. I think that. But you're saying that wasn't just a consequence of his policies. You're saying he kind of got up in the morning and says, man, who the hell can I pit against?
Yeah, I think he was a tool used by, more elevated players than him in this sort of global conflict we're in. And I'll leave you with this, but let's stay on the topic. We're in a battle against global central planners that want to fleece us of our money and our wealth and our liberty to their own gain. These are the people that want to make decisions for us, that want a feudalism 2.0. that want us to be, the average person, a serf. And that is what we are really fighting against. We're not really fighting against communism and socialism. That's the sales pitch for the dumb kids, because you can't go to the dumb kids and say, hey, we're going to make all the decisions for you. We want you to be these, workers, or if you're useless, we'll put you on drugs and have you play video games, which is what Noah Yuval Harari said, right? The World Economic Forum. I go, look, liberals and conservatives probably agree by about 80% of the things. It's the fringe issues on the 10% ends of it, where we get ourselves all, hung up. But the truth is, most of us kind of the reasonable people. I'm not talking about the far left nut jobs. I'm not talking about the far right nut jobs. Most of us want to live our lives, run our businesses, have great families, experience great things, go on vacations, have a good time, right? But there are people who have an insatiable desire to control other people and want to accumulate power and wealth, and they want to do it by any means necessary. They'll use the government, they'll use all kinds of functions to do it. That's the battle that we're in, and conversation and togetherness and strong families interrupt that. That's why they're doing all kinds of things. And there's guys like Barack Obama and other politicians on the right and the left that are proxies for those people. That's what I believe. So it's a little bit more nuanced than Barack Obama just putting his pants on and going, I'm going to divide.
Right. So I see what you're saying. You're not saying necessarily this is a conscious thing. I'm going to divide, but that you're saying these politicians like him are serving interests that very much want to keep us divided.
Correct.
And in order to get money from these people, they kind of have to serve the divisive interests of the global corporate elite. Is that fair?
Yeah. And we want free enterprise and small business and things like that to reign supreme, families to reign supreme, individuals and sovereignty to reign supreme, not these corporate, animals and bankers and Wall Street and globalists and oligarchs to run us all. I don't want a left wing or a right wing master.
I don't want to deny that we've made lots of racial progress in this country, right? Because we have, and I think anybody that does, and there's some people on my own side. I'm a liberal Democrat, and there are people on my side of the aisle, I think, that minimize the progress we've made, which we
are the least racist country that has ever existed on the face of this earth.
I mean, I think a lot of countries in Europe would have struggled to elect a black guy named Barack Hussein Obama, right? I mean, there's a lot of things I think we can celebrate, but there are lots of studies, right, where they'll do studies where they'll give people resumes, right, identical qualified resumes, right, and they have one stereotypical white name, right, like Brian Carmichael or whatever, and they have a stereotypically black name like Tyrone Johnson or something, right? And when they have these things, overwhelmingly there's preference given to the white name, or they'll do studies
if you trust those studies
with mortgages. I mean, these are academic studies, right?
But I mean, look, academia. Dr. James Lindsay got academia to bless all kinds of papers like heteronormative rape culture in dog parks, and he got all of these things published, and they won awards on fat bodybuilding and.
There's the data. Okay, what about right?
Well, but let me
just give you one more piece of data. Like, I live in Philadelphia, and
I was born there.
Oh, were you really? Nice. Did you grow up here? Or
until I was about 8 or 9, and then
whereabouts? What part of Philadelphia?
We were in Germantown at the time.
Sure,
my dad was going to school at Westminster. He's a pastor.
I have been to Westminster I've used their library.
And then he moved us back to California.
So your dad was hardcore Calvinist. That's gourmet Calvinism at Westminster.
Well, and he was he went to Bob Jones, which was a super ultra Baptist.
Oh, wow.
But my dad was not really either. My dad was a pretty independent and original thinker, and it got him into a good kind of trouble over the years. I mean, I did adopt that from him, at least.
So here in Philadelphia, I live near the western suburbs. I'm right in the middle of the city, but in the western suburbs, the main line, which is called, they looked at traffic stops, right? And this is a pretty tawny suburban part of the city. About the black population of that part of this of the Philly burbs is less than the wider population rates. I think around 8 or 7% or something. Blacks accounted for 92% of the traffic stops. I don't think they're all speeders, right? Like,
Okay,
I mean,
but you just brought up two interesting things, and I want to ask you why is that the case? Because there are reasons, and those reasons can't be ignored. But let's I would love to pause on that one, and let's go back to the original point that what Charlie was saying is true. Bad policies by Democrats largely, who were the racists, and the whole they flipped, and all that sort of dumb stuff, it holds no water. But what happened was the people who were the racists, including Lyndon Baines Johnson and others that were behind the civil rights movement, including Martin Luther King, who I'm not a fan of, they sold a bill of goods. Well, hang on, and I want to tell you why. We'll elaborate on this.
Sure.
They sold black culture a bill of goods and enslaved them in a different way. They enslaved them to the state. They got black mothers to marry the state. They incentivized single mother homes. And Charlie points this out, and Charlie pointed this out time and time again beautifully, that what happened was prior to those things, and this is what he was saying, black culture had much more similar, and in some cases much higher rates of intact families, homes with fathers in them. Something happened. And
Bryce, how do we know that data? Because we can't trust any studies, right? How do we know the data, right? Academic historian chronicles that, right? I mean,
challenge all the data. I'm okay with that.
Charlie got that from a book with footnotes. I'm guessing he didn't just go to old censuses. He got it from the work of a scholar somewhere.
Well, maybe a conservative I'm not discounting. Scholar. Yeah, no. Hang on a minute. I'm not discounting all scholars. I'm not discounting all scholarship. But I do think that there are corrupted studies, and it can be corrupted by anyone who has a something to sell, right, or some agenda, right? I'm not discounting all academic studies. I mean, I want to be very, very clear on that. I'm also not discounting all data, but we know we can manipulate things, for our own outcomes and to get the things. So not everything can be trusted is what I'm saying, but not everything should be discounted either. But we do know that there was a dramatic turn of events over the years, and we do know that you get more of what you incent and tolerate. And you had very strong families. You also had very strong black businesses. You had Black Wall Street. You had every culture. I don't care whether it's, black, Asian, Irish, goes through, if they're at the bottom of a society, right? And they are the poor ones. And yes, blacks being enslaved and all that stuff caused that. But they go through this period of time where they become stronger and stronger as a culture. And then, pretty soon, you get to negotiate. What happened was Martin Luther King and others, and Malcolm X I'm a fan of, because Malcolm X told them and warned them, and they should have listened more to Malcolm X. And Malcolm X was taken out in a different way, but Martin Luther King sold his people, and he was a socialist and a communist. And you just need to read his writings to know that. I mean, he didn't hide it. But
he wasn't a Marxist. I mean, this is like when people call, I mean, he was not a communist, right? I mean, he was not. He did lean left. I mean, I've read a lot of King's stuff. I've actually read King's dissertation, but I think that's one of the. He was not a communist, right? I mean, he was left.
He was a socialist. I mean, you don't need to say that he's an outright communist, but communism and socialism are cousins. I mean,
they're different. They're different, right? I mean, there's that. I mean, socialism, where I mean, if we want to say that he thinks that there should be shared ownership of the means of production, is that? I mean, I would have a tough time finding a quote where he said
free enterprise.
Well, I mean, this is. I mean, look. I think we could on one poll, we could do like an ideal typewriter. On one end of this pure capitalism, free market, where there's no state intervention, no laws, Mad Max Beyond Thunder. And then the other one, we have a sort of statist, Marxism on steroids. Those societies don't exist, right? I mean, we have everything exists somewhere in the middle of those.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I mean,
right?
Yeah, but I want to. So I think we kind of touched on what Charlie was saying. There was not. It was good to to have slavery. It was good to have the Jim Crow laws. I mean, he was very far from that. And by the way, within the TPUSA organization, at leadership levels, at personality influencer levels, I mean, it is filled with Black, Mexican, Asian, gay. I mean, everybody from every persuasion was a part of TPUSA. I mean, it's that is without question the case. I mean, Charlie gave Candace Owens her start. I mean, there are so many, wonderful people that came out of the TPUSA organization that were Black, and Charlie, never displayed anything other than reverence for people, and we all shared common ideas, and that was what this organization was about. So for him to say something that is edgy or insensitive or provocative, there was nothing wrong in what he said, and I stand by his comments and his remarks. You talked about traffic violations or pull cops pulling them over, or you talked about the resumes, and I asked you the question, why is that? Because not every hiring director or every cop is thinking that hey, I'm racist in my heart because of the color of their skin. They're bad people. I'm not going to hire them in that conscious effort, right? But why is it that, again, if you believe all those studies and some of these things are suspicious, right? But if you believe that, why is that? There are cultural issues within the Black community that have been allowed to proliferate. There is gang culture that has been allowed to proliferate. There's violence in the culture that has been allowed to proliferate. And people have not had honest conversations about that. Remember years ago, and of course this guy proved to be a bad guy, but Bill Cosby was like, pull your pants up, and some of those sort of things. We glorified a lot of the worst of that culture. Asians who are poor are not committing the same amount of crimes that Blacks are per capita, right? The violent crime is overwhelmingly an issue within the Black community, just overwhelmingly. So what is wrong? And people are not wanting to ask, like, what is wrong and how do we repair it? Because it's not the color of their skin.
Yeah. But this is what I think would I think my friends who are involved in like anti-racist activism or something, right? They would say something like this, right? They might say it more forcefully than I would, right? But so you have a prejudice, right? And maybe it's founded, maybe it's not, right? You're saying Black culture, violent, this, that. But so a guy's got prejudice, right? Eventually the prejudice is, hey, Blacks are just less reliable than whites, or Blacks are just more this than the whites. And then if a bunch of those people have the prejudice, right? Like say a bunch of people from this group have this prejudice about this group, you could say it's founded, it's not founded, it's a little bit of both. There's other things. Then when they go to hire people or pull people over, there's a system, right? And the system takes on the prejudices a little bit, right? Because the decision makers in the system, a lot of them have the same. Now, I'm not saying they all hate Black people. I'm not saying they're all like, damn, I wouldn't. A lot of them probably wouldn't be upset if their kid married someone Black, right? They're probably open to that, right? And yet at the same time, have these stereotypes that sometimes make their way into policy decisions that sometimes
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I'll give you that, but you cannot. You can't really point to specific laws that say that, right? You can't really point to laws, because point me to a law and I'll condemn it. And nobody ever does. What they say is it's systemic. Okay, so why is it systemic?
I'll tell you, after World War II, the GI Bill, right? Like Levittown, right? Levittown, New York, Levittown, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philly here. These communities that were built by Levitt, right? Got GI Bill money. Black soldiers who served, right? who would be eligible for GI Bill stuff couldn't go there, right? Couldn't go to a lot of these
Yeah, but
communities. And they're
you're
just,
having to go all the way back to World
yeah,
War
yeah,
II.
but then you have things like inherited wealth and things like this that there's that just. I'm not saying that means no one has an opportunity or no one can
Right.
get ahead. I'm just saying sometimes groups have it a little harder. Sometimes they pull ahead. Sometimes I think
But you understand that the prescription for that is it's a generational issue, right? So you need
Yeah.
generational solutions. So
Sure.
there needs to be repair within Black, leadership, Black fathers. Black. There are people. There are a host of the Al Sharptons and people out there in the world that are the race baiters that are activists that if racism quells or goes down, they're out of a job. There's people that profit within their own community off of all of this stuff, and and I think you would agree with that. There's people that are out there, essentially. Helping to foment this stuff rather than saying, let's get our act together, right? Let's get they don't want to talk about the fatherless home issue.
I think there are activists on all sides of issues that
Of course.
are more interested in stoking conflict,
of course,
than solving problems. So I think that's on all sides issue, sure. But I
have no disagreement with that.
And I think this is helpful. I think this is a hot button topic, right? Like systemic racism. And it sounds like you and I we don't agree on everything, but we can talk and we can describe the problem.
And this, by the way, is how you solve the problems. Because if you can't define something, you can't actually fix it. That's why homelessness is the stupidest euphemism on the planet. Because it's not homelessness. When we gave them hotel rooms during COVID and things like that, they just trashed and blew up the hotels and wrecked and ruined them. And then they, stayed still out on the street. Los Angeles, it was absolute terrible in that sort of stuff. And they spent, millions and millions and millions of dollars on activists and things like that lined their own pockets. So you have to define something to solve it. So what is wrong with the Black community? It's a cultural issue that needs to be fixed by the Black community. It needs to be fixed by people honestly talking about it. Why is there a proliferation of violence? What's happening? Why are there more, traffic stops? Okay. Is there a profiling issue that happens to be, is it just that the cops are abusive? Half of the cops, and I taught, jujitsu and arrest control to law enforcement for many, many years. Half of those dudes are Black. They've gone really, really hardcore at hiring minorities, and the racial profiling hasn't stopped.
No, and I think when things are systemic, right, it doesn't always fix it when you bring in, when you diversify, right? Because sometimes systems can have a life of their. There's a group thing.
Sure,
right?
But when you're a cop, and let me just ask you this: when you're a police officer rolling down the street, and you see two dudes, Black, dressed in suits, carrying Bibles in their hands, and I'm making a funny, exaggeration here. Versus two dudes, dressed in gang attire, looking suspicious. They used to, and unfortunately, policing has stopped this because of the poor state of policing now. But they used to roll up on those guys and ask them some questions. You look the part of someone who is engaged in criminal activity, not just because you're Black, because in Bakersfield, California, where it's largely still white, low-life criminals, they would roll up on the dudes that looked like they were, skinhead type, they roll up on those dudes, right? So in communities, the look and the type of the people that are committing crimes. The look and the type of the people that need to be rolled up on and shooken loose a little bit. And that is normal policing that prevents.
But isn't this where guys like Charlie, who was such an advocate for the Constitution, right? And some of the guys on the right, one of the things that I appreciated about my friends on the right is the emphasis on the Constitution and civil liberties and constitutional rights don't we need to? I mean, of course we could stop all the crime if we just roll up on it. I mean, this is the thing, right? But what does Franklin say? Those who trade liberty for security deserve neither, right? I mean, on some level, right? There's a reason why we try to mitigate that. Hey, if we just kind of shake down all the people we think might, eventually, they say what was the ruling recently that with the Supreme Court ruling that now speaking Spanish is enough of a probable cause to I mean these things I get that we have profiles and things like this in law enforcement, right? But don't we want some of that mitigated
I do,
with the
but
civil
but
liberty
you
protections?
you got to recognize we didn't get there accidentally. We got to these places where we have, all of these illegal immigrants, right? Where we have all of these issues with illegal immigration and open borders and all that. We got there by a lot of bad policies leading up to that. And then to get ourselves back to a better way of dealing with all that is messy. And so that's the problem. And I do not believe our Constitution applies the same way to, illegal aliens who are not citizens of the United States. I mean, that's why we have a different due process court for them called the immigration courts. And there's all kinds of lies that had been out there in regards to that, right? Oh, where's the due process? It is a different format for non-citizens.
Sure, there's immigration courts. Sure, absolutely. Let me ask you this.
Sure.
What do you and Turning Point and Charlie Kirk, I said it like I know, but Charlie Kirk was an advocate for going to people he didn't agree with. In fact, Ezra Klein from the New York Times said this in a piece about him. He said, I almost admire. I wish he did admire. He said he wishes there were more people like this on the left that would go out and talk to and seek out people that disagreed. Right? What do you think people on the left, right, when they dialogue with you or you dialogue with them, what do you think they most misunderstand about you, and what do you think you misunderstand most about them?
Oh, that's a great question, and let me kind of think through that as we talk in real time here. I think that there are caricatures told by both sides. Okay, I think there are caricatures. You like your friend said, don't platform this guy, right? That's absurd, right? Now the left, the right never says that, by the way. The right will talk to anyone, largely. Okay, we will platform anyone because what that does largely. Look, most guys aren't reasonable like you, who are on the left, especially a lot. Well,
I don't know if I should be insulted or taking this comment, but thank you. I take
no. I mean, you're willing to have a dialogue. You're taking what I say in good faith, right?
Absolutely.
I'm taking what you say in good faith. Like you and I could go and have a cocktail, have a dinner together, have a blast.
Absolutely.
We could be friends, right?
Absolutely.
And I could see that already.
Any guy that's dad went to Westminster, a bastion of Calvinism, I can hang out with.
There you go. But I mean, we could be friends. Okay. Now the far left and mostly, I mean, man, my team tries so hard to get anyone who disagrees with me on my show. And it is nearly impossible for that, word that they use, platforming. I believe it's because they don't really know why they believe what they believe. I think you do. Right. And
Bryce,
I think
I'll
you're
come
willing
on
to
anytime,
challenge it.
I will speak for the left. I will come on anytime.
Yeah. And I think, though, because of your nature and what we've already talked about, I would not consider you the left. I promise. Just in our conversation and this much that I know you, I would consider you more of a classic liberal, right?
I voted for Bernie Sanders every time he's been on the ballot.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. But I
do consider myself a classical liberal. I mean, I consider myself in the Enlightenment tradition, right? I mean,
the Overton window, though, has moved so far in one direction that I mean the classic liberal has been overrun by the far left people who don't want to actually have dialogue and are calling us Nazis. I mean, I don't know if you've watched any of my clips, but I did a quick clip right after Charlie was shot, and I've been predicting that we would have that kind of violence for years, because the left started this mantra that words are violence. And once you say that enough, and then you have the media and other people ginning this up by calling us Nazis. I mean, I've been called a white supremacist and Nazi, thousands of times, LGBTQ hater, I mean, everything, because I have disagreements on things. I've been called some of the most evil, vile things. Well, hey, it's self-defense then if they shoot me, if words are violence. That is the state that we've gotten to. That is what's been horrible about the dialogue here in this country over the last 10 years, especially.
Yeah, I think what is becoming the fault line in politics is not left right, but liberal versus illiberal right, because I think you have populism in all of its forms tends to be illiberal, right? It tends to not be a creature of the Enlightenment constitutional tradition, right? And I see this. I mean, look at Donald Trump right now, right? I mean, I know people that voted for Trump because of, and I got this. They thought Kamala Harris and the left were anti-free speech and censorship people, and some certainly are. Cancel culture is certainly censorious. But then Trump with that tweet, right? I mean, did you see the or no? It's not a tweet. It's the truth, right? Where he says, where was it? Where he says, I'll read it as him. Great news for America. The ratings challenged Jimmy Kimmel show is canceled. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Kimmel has zero talent and worse ratings than even Colbert, if that's possible. That leaves Jimmy and Seth to total losers on fake news NBC. Their ratings are also horrible. Do it, NBC, President DJT. No, if that's not cancel culture, what is, right? Taunting.
Well, I'll tell you, because I actually don't think that's entirely cancel culture, and I'm not defending. I believe I'm being reasonable and objective here. Jimmy Kimmel's ratings were way down. Jimmy Kimmel,
of course.
Jimmy Kimmel and a bunch of those guys.
We're not talking about the firing of Kimmel, although the FCC director did say, if they don't respond to this, we might pull the license, right? But what I'm talking about is his tweet, his saying, what about Fallon and Seth? I mean, Fallon is the most innocuous. Fallon is so non-offensive. Fallon's kind of a goofball that's really good at dancing. Why does Trump want Fallon gone?
So look, I mean, Donald Trump is a rabble rouser. Donald Trump, I don't agree with everything that Donald Trump says. I don't, I get labeled as a, MAGA and all that sort of stuff. I don't believe that anyone is my Messiah other than Jesus Christ, right?
Amen.
And by the way, most of us, Charlie, same, all of us are the same. There's plenty of things that we can do and, disagree with him and his approach. He's a rabble rouser. He's one of the most effective of them.
The guy that led me to Christ is watching this right now. He's a Republican. I think he voted for Trump.
Amen.
He loves this. After you said I'm not a liberal, he messaged me, see, you're a Republican now. So
if you hang out with me, you might become more conservative.
We'll see.
I have that effect on people. No, but the truth is that there's a vibe shift that has happened right now.
Yeah.
And Kimmel and all those guys that have been lying to us, propagandizing us, showing only one side of things for so long, are collapsing. And this had more to do with that than it had to do with his comments. Donald Trump loves to pile on, and God bless him for it. I mean, the guy's an expert in, like I said, being a rabble rouser, right? That's what we have here. Cancel culture is when they do what they did to Gina Carano, or when they go and they dig back
Right,
18 years into your history, and they're like, look, this guy said this one time, and then you get shut out of things. That, and they did that to a lot of people. Like Gina Carano at the time was very popular on the Mandalorian show that she did, and she said something that was objectively true and not anti-Semitic at the time. I think, I forget exactly her quote, but nothing was wrong with what she said, and they reacted quickly and bashed her. And we were in that moment, the Me Too moment. There's all these things that went way too far. But for Kimmel, who's been unfunny for a long time now. And I was a fan of him back, in the day when Adam Carolla and him were banging around and doing the Man
Show. The Man Show was much better format and television.
And the only reason, by the way, that they didn't go after him for all that stuff, and the blackface and everything else, is because he was doing their work. He was coming back, and he was carrying the left-wing water for everybody.
Yeah, I think both Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon don't have the sort of skill set for late night. Now Colbert does. I think he's a great interviewer. I think comedically he's sharp. He's fast.
Right. Well, time has moved.
He's going too.
Time has moved past all those guys. I mean, the vibe shift, you look, young men right now that are coming up, and this is thanks to Charlie, are trending 40% more conservative than they ever have. So, I mean, everything is moving in a direction that is back to being a little bit more raw, honest, edgy. You can say what you want to say. If we want to use the word retard, we can. Like, things are moving back to more of a reasonable, let's have fun again. I mean, there's no comedy on the left. None of those guys.
I mean, Jon Stewart's funny.
But Jon Stewart
there's a lot of funny.
Jon Stewart is a little bit more liberal. I mean, Jon Stewart was speaking some truth on COVID back in the day. Jon Stewart comes by a little bit more honesty, and and comedy is kind of honest. It's raw and it's honest. When you're manipulating people through left-wing politics, it falls flat. Trevor Noah was the distinctly most unfunny guy on the planet Earth, and they gave him a show.
Yeah, I don't think Trevor Noah was the best successor to Jon Stewart. But when you say something like Jon Stewart's not of the left, tell me what you mean, because I think he probably votes the furthest left he can, right? He's from Jersey, grew up in Trenton. He probably votes for Bernie Sanders. So when you say he's not left, are you not? You're not talking about policy prescriptions. Are you talking about kind of worldview, cultural sensibility? Are you talking about cancellation culture? That's what you're saying.
If you're just looking at voting records, right? I mean, if I'm voting for, in a race, I'm going to vote for the Republican versus the Democrat, and I might be voting for some, uniparty shill, but he happens to have a R by his name, right? If you identify well, I'm a part of this political party, when we are in a two-party system, it's a little bit difficult to, of course, Jon Stewart's not voting for Donald Trump or, voting for, Nancy Mace or things like that. But I don't look at voting records. I look at worldview. And there are people like Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart doesn't want to shut everybody up on the other side, right? They don't want to, Jon Stewart wasn't out there as aggressively advocating for Donald Trump to be thrown in prison for 700 years. I see those kind of things. I see what people are tweeting out. I see what people are saying, and we want people who are allowing liberty to exist. And you can be somebody who wants maximum liberty and have a more liberal or left-leaning perspective. You can be someone who wants liberty who has a more right-leaning perspective.
So you are buying into what I say then. You sort of do think it's really, there's the classic liberals and the illiberals, and you have the illiberals on the left and the right, and you have classic liberals who are Democrats or Republicans, but are for a fundamental, what you would see as open society, free speech, a sort of civil libertarian almost kind of perspective. That for you would be the fault line. It's not that people want to expand Medicaid or something, you can talk with those people. What bothers you is the people that are for censoriousness and shut everybody out and run that person out of town and deplatform them. That's what gets your goat, is what you're saying.
Correct. And there are people on the right that advocate for that stuff. I mean, Dr. James Lindsay has gotten himself like bounced out of a lot of speaking engagements on the right recently because he's been talking about the sort of Christian nationalist woke right, because there are people that are using Marxist techniques on the right now who believe that, oh, now's our time to grab power and we're going to subvert everybody and we're going to shut things down and we're going to have, you know, all these laws on the books to lock people into, you know, almost like a, you know, Sharia style Christianity kind of a thing. You know, that I didn't fight against my left-wing masters to now have right-wing masters. I want liberty as our founding fathers envisioned for all of us. And then, you know, there's guardrails within that, of course, and the Constitution is supreme in those guardrails. But we, you know, I don't want to trade one oppressor for the other.
No, let me ask you. I have friends on the left. You know, I'm in Philadelphia, first up. How, you know, it's hard to, you know, everybody's on the left out here. On the dating apps, man. I mean, you ought to see like what women write on their profiles. It's pretty aggressive as far as their politics. But they're thinking like a guy like you, right? It's Handmaid's Tale. You want to take their rights away. You want to set women back. You want to. I mean, that's what you know what people say, right? They thought this about Charlie Kirk. How do you respond to that when people say, "Look, man, Bryce, I can't even talk to you because you want to set us back pre-1950. You are a retrograde, patriarchal, Christian, xenophobic, nationalist. What I'm trying to think of some other words, right? Misogynist. You know what the line, right?
Sure.
How do you say, look, I think you would say, you've got me all wrong here. How would you say that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, again, those are caricatures, right? And those are caricatures meant to shut down debate and talk. I mean, you know, Charlie talked about, it's funny because I got into this with a friend the other night, and, you know, everybody was, you know, a little bit of, wine involved at this point. So people weren't maybe listening to each other, but you know, one of my friends made it a point about you know male and female and work and, you know, that kind of a thing, and we started getting to a little bit of the discussion there. And Charlie, you know, advocated for a world in which you could go and easily in the middle class have a single family income and still own a home and go on vacation and do all the things that we did back in the 1950s. There were good things that got corrupted by bad policy, where the American public got fleeced, and you know, everybody has to have, you know, two incomes unless you're, you know, an extraordinary earner. Right now, Charlie envisioned a world where that was possible again through good tax policy, you know, all of that. But that's very different than what they'll do is they'll take that and be like, oh, Charlie wants the women to be staying home barefoot and pregnant. No, he wants the option for a woman who wants to do that to be able to stay home and raise the kids. That's very different. We're not talking about forcing women down certain paths, but we're talking about making those paths available again. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had in the professional environment, in you know, my business, corporate, professional environments, where I've had conversations with women who were told that for them to have self-worth, they needed to pursue vigorously a career. They did that, and then they all of a sudden woke up one day and realized that that's not what they wanted. Now they're beyond their childbearing years, or their, you know, kids don't love them anymore because they left them with babysitters, and, you know, or there's problems that were associated with them focusing on a career, and they, you know, crying to me. I had a gal on my show a couple of times in the early days who was very far left, kind of converted, and then realized that, you know, she destroyed all of these opportunities and relationships she had to have what she really wanted. And you know, in tears, like sobbing tears, you know, telling me that she regrets it. You know, I mean, there's wanting to have women valued for raising children and managing a home and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's very far from the caricature of, yeah, we want them in the Handmaid's Tale kind of BS.
I heard somebody, a New York Times guy that covered Charlie Kirk, right? And they were I don't know if friendly's the right word, but they talked a lot, like, and they talked to him like the day after, and he said he had texted with Charlie just before he got shot because they were going to have dinner because he wanted to interview Charlie again for a project, and he said they had a quite friendly relationship. He said what he saw in Charlie Kirk was a tension between the inner Christian and the inner Limbaugh, because he was a huge Limbaugh admirer, and so you could have this sort of gentle, charitable kind of, and I've seen this in a lot of the stuff I've seen, and then you can see a more combative, in your face sort of, and these seem like both real. I mean,
Mhm.
do you think those were intention? Do you think those were more integrated in him, and that's unfair to say they were intention? I mean, do you think he had the sort of boisterous, combative side and the grace-oriented Christian side? Do you think they were integrated in him?
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, if you go back to Charlie's early videos and early appearances, he was far more combative. It was like Frank Turek and others that helped Charlie mature in those areas, to where as he became more salty and deep in his faith, he became more compassionate in the way that he handled some of his most aggressive detractors at the microphones. There were some people. I mean, we're talking about some of these kids were displaying such weaponized ignorance. I mean, some of them, the things that they were arguing, I'm not talking about just, I mean, they didn't understand the definition of words, and they were so committed to their own wrong definition of a word that they couldn't get past these things. And they're and people in real time were like correcting them online, and all around them going, no, Googling things and all stuff. And Charlie would tell the audience, hey, stop, let them speak, guys, let's not do that. You saw him routinely even rein in as a leader. When I first went on some of those campus events, you would have Charlie and 20% supporters and 80% haters. It got to the point where it was 10% haters and 90% supporters surrounding him. I mean, look at the sea of MAGA hats behind him at any of these stops now. Everybody there is pretty much wearing a MAGA hat, and they have to usher carefully the person who disagreed to the front of the line to the microphone. I mean, it was an incredible switch. But you also saw Charlie really soften and really be less combative. So I don't think there was necessarily a tension. I think that there was a maturing process. But man, some of those kids, and I'm pretty good at being soft and compassionate and reasonable, in the midst of those heated things. I mean, I'm a combat sports athlete. I'm not, physically afraid of somebody. I'm not, I'm not intimidated. But even sometimes, man, I want to throttle some of those, little a-holes. Some of them were disgusting human beings that came out there. And it's, and Charlie did an amazing job being unaffected by them.
What makes a disgusting human being? When you say that, what puts a person in that category?
Oh, there was a kid that came up, here I live in Idaho now, and at the Boise stop, and the clip's online. There's a kid that was like, Barack Obama is inside you on one end 6 inches, and Joe Biden is in you the other way 6 inches. Which way are you moving, Charlie? I mean,
wow,
that's disgusting.
wow.
That's a disgusting human being that's going to waste their time coming up there with a question like that.
Yeah, that's pretty pornographic.
Yeah.
So you're in Idaho right now. So
Yeah.
I have some friends who are pretty connected to the scene in Moscow there with Doug Wilson.
Yeah. I know Doug. I've been up there. I've spent time with all those guys.
Yeah, I'm trying to get Doug on the show. I know somebody at the church. I'm trying to get Doug on the show because I think Doug wrote the best book on infant baptism I've ever read. It's a great book, To 1,000 Generations. It's called. When Charlie was called a Christian nationalist, and I'm sure you get this label, right? People,
Sure.
this moniker gets thrown around, right? What is that? Did Charlie? Do you pull back from that label? Do you lean into it? Do you think it's misunderstood? Would you own it? How would you explain? Like, what's your relationship to Christian nationalism?
Well, so it's a misunderstood idea and term, and it can mean a lot of different things depending on who's using it, right? Because I've got friends that will say, "Yeah, I am," well, okay, I'm a Christian, yes. I believe in national sovereignty. I believe it's okay to love your country. All right, am I a Christian nationalist? And that's what Charlie would say, by the way. But he would reject the idea and the label because a lot of the people that mean that is that there needs to be a revival in our legal system towards a Christian standard in all things. Legally, we need to enforce certain, Christian dictates via law. There's stuff like that versus recognizing that, by the way, we are a Christian nation, and people, like to disagree on that one. But in every country on the planet Earth, there will be a religious ideology that reigns supreme. In our country, for the most of our founding and our history, it has been Christianity, or you can call it the Judeo-Christian foundation, whatever. It informed our laws. It informed our morality. It informed our views and the way we look at the world. And it is, I believe, precisely why we were the least racist nation on the planet eventually, right? We were the most liberty-loving and free because we were taking that model from Christianity. It's why we're friendliest to all other religions. Nobody has more religious freedom than we do. But something is going to reign supreme. Over the last, couple of decades, they've really been pushing us towards this secular humanism. But I don't care if it's veganism or environmentalism or all these sort of things that become a person's religion, or all of the above. We are a creature that needs some kind of religious, underpinning. That is inherent within us. We have that call. America was great because of its Christian founding, because of its founding upon those principles. That's what made us the most prosperous nation on earth.
So I'm a Christian, and I've done some advanced study in theology and stuff. So a lot of my friends on the left, because the left is just more secular, right? I mean, it just is. It's kind of Democrats are increasingly becoming the non-faith party, right?
And by the way, I'm going to say something, and then we'll get to this. I believe that the Democrat political party platform is wholly incongruent with the Christian faith. All right, say what you were going to say. And
wholly, we'll get back to that. That's bold, but okay.
Well, let's get.
I'll leave that. I'll leave that for another conversation because we could get into that point. But I think a lot of my friends who don't know evangelicals, right? They just don't know any, right? Which is interesting because they're a lot. I mean, they might be as much as a third of the country, depending on what demographer you go to or whatever. But they will ask me, Scott, you know these people, right? How can they support someone that is so unchristian? The philandering, the fraudulent business stuff, the cruelty, I hear this all the time from friends who just don't talk to folks on the right, especially talk to evangelical Christians, which I spend a lot of time with. How would you answer that question if one of my secular progressive friends asked it? How the hell, Bryce, you're a Christian guy. You seem like you're a nice guy. You seem like you take your faith. How can you support this guy that seems that I get you can be a Republican. I get, whatever. How can you support this guy? They're going to say that seems to if it's like the Seinfeld episode, do the opposite. It seems like this guy looks at Jesus and says, how can I do the opposite? How can you get behind a guy like that?
Well, first, I mean, Donald Trump's story is more complex than that, right? Some of the things that you're talking about, you're going back in history, back in time when he was a Democrat, by the way. Some of these things,
big Democrat. Yeah,
I mean, first, look, there's the kind of pat answers that some of the guys give. You're not voting for pastor in chief. You're voting for commander in chief, and there's some truth to that, right? Donald Trump. shared some tremendous values with me. And some of those are pro-America, pro-sovereignty, pro-freedom. I mean, Donald Trump, I believe, was incredibly authentic in loving America and wanting to see America do well. He's been incredibly consistent on that. You know, look at his early interviews with Oprah and things. Hey, we got a bad deal. I mean, he's been saying the same thing.
Absolutely. Since the 80s. The tariff stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You vote for policy. You vote for someone who is going to advocate for the policies you want. Donald Trump has done that. So for us as Christians, you know, we can look at that and we can say, okay, I want those policies. I want those things to be put in place. This guy says he's going to do it. We have a track record where he did, and you know, wasn't perfect, but he did, right? He did what we asked him to do. So I think it's quite easy. We also look at it within the context of the Bible. We had all kinds of broken people as good kings. We had all kinds of broken people. David comes to mind, who was a murderer. I mean, we have had all kinds of fractured human beings do great things as leaders. And look, if leaders of that ilk, you're not going to get someone perfect, and you're going to get someone who has led a colorful and storied life. What I find incredible is they'll look at a Joe Biden and be like, oh yeah, well, but then I can vote for this over here. I mean, that makes no sense, because a lot of, I mean, frankly, we can go, through some of the policies were destructive, or they were, playing into the hands of our global enemies or our foreign adversaries. I mean, there's on the other side of it. I mean, you can't say that Joe Biden was a great guy. I mean, Joe Biden was a philanderer as well. I mean, he married his babysitter. Joe Bidden,
but there was no proven infidelity or anything like that. I mean, Joe, I mean that's this. It's a little different. I mean, I'm not. I'm just saying. I'm not saying Joe Biden was perfect, but Trump is. I mean, exceptionally smart. I think a little bit. And just say.
Well, some of the things that you brought up in terms of some of the business deals and some of those sort of things. I mean, the 34 felony counts. I mean, the people trotting that out in that way, for one, business issue to have 34 counts, and people are like, it was 34.
I grew up in Jersey, and this was in the news all the time, and stuff like, and I'm feel like, I mean, stuff like. With Ivanka's wedding, he just didn't pay the caterers and people, and just said, "Hey, look, you got paid. You can say you did a Trump wedding. That's enough." I mean, the stiffing contractors and like that. I mean, just
I'm not excusing any of those. Yeah, but I'm not excusing any of those. I'm not even talking about those. And by the way, he was a Democrat then, anyway.
Yeah, he was I was with the Democrats again. I mean, it was all
but I also I've seen, and I know from behind the scenes, things that I can't repeat because he does not like if you ever talk about him out of turn, right? And I'm not a gossip anyway, but there is great evidence to see a transformation of Donald Trump behind the scenes is not a fake thing. Okay. Still an imperfect man, right?
Sure.
But there is a lot of, people I know, and some very firsthand accounts that I'm aware of, that Donald Trump, I mean, do you believe a guy like Donald Trump, could repent and could come to the faith, as complicated as it might be, as complex as he might be, as struggling as he might be with the proclivities of a Donald Trump? There's great evidence that he had a big transformation over the years. Also, since the attempt on his life, there was some really big transformational things that happened to him behind the scene. And again, I have that on very trusted sources. Some of them are firsthand things that I've seen.
Miroslav Volf, great theologian, he's at Yale now, used to teach at Fuller. Says in a book called Exclusion and Embrace, which is one of the best books I've ever read, actually. He says, forgiveness flounders because I exclude my enemy from the community of humans, and I exclude myself from the community of sinners, right? This dual move he sees, right?
That's
Where
great.
they're not really human and I'm not really sinful, right? I'm above the fray, I'm above the cut, and they're not really, they don't really do, they're not really in the human team. How do we what, as a Christian, how could we put more grace in our politics? What would it look like if we had a more grace infused political culture, and how could we work towards that?
Well, how could we work towards it is by doing this. You and I having a really honest conversation. I mean, you're an emissary. There are your friends that are on this, listening to this, that I'm sure they run the gamut of, liberal to, maybe further left. You probably have an audience of people that you are influencing by having me on and us talking reasonably. I mean, I haven't pulled any punches. I'm exactly who I am, in public and private with my beliefs. Them hearing and then, oh, okay, well, what this guy said, all right, maybe I disagree here, but some of the stuff is reasonable. He's not coming at things, Handmaid's Tale and all this stuff that the propagandists want us to believe, to divide us, by the way. We end up finding out over the breaking of bread and the having of a, cocktail, if you drink, brings people into fellowship. And you can say, okay, I disagree with you, but you're still my brother, especially if we're both claiming to be Christians.
Bryce, this has been great. I really have appreciated the conversation. It sprung on me today. Your publicity people kind of emailed me. It was really nice. This has been a really great conversation, and I hope we could do it again because I really enjoyed it.
I would love to, and let's get them to get you on my show too, and let's have.
I would love to
I
come
hope
on your
many
show.
more of these discussions.
I would love to come and be the Democratic punching bag on the show, or the pinata. Thanks, Bryce. I enjoyed having you on.
Hey, thank you so much.